Chapter 31 Apology and Instruction. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. When Naruto woke up again, it was already dark. He looked at the familiar bed and was a little confused. Why was he here? Awake? A familiar voice came, and Naruto couldn't help but open his eyes wide. He turned his head and found that it was indeed Xia Li. At this time, Naruto finally remembered what happened. He seemed to be knocked unconscious by Xia Li, but he remembered that he should have successfully maintained this friendship. Seeing the expression on Naruto's face, Xia Li also roughly knew that the other party was recalling the past. Thinking of their friendship, he was a little helpless. Naruto regarded him as a friend, and he always felt like the other party's old father. Besides, it was quite difficult for Xia Li, a soul of several dozen years old, to really regard a child as that kind of friend. However, since Naruto thought it was okay, let's keep it like this. Xia Li, you haven't left yet? Naruto got off the bed without any discomfort. Seeing this scene, Xia Li couldn't help but sigh. It was really rare that he was beaten like this and basically recovered so quickly. Although he controlled it and didn't hurt the other party's important parts, it would take him several days to fully recover from such pain. Really, comparing people is annoying, but this is also the reason why Xia Li was so cruel. Not yet, after all, I knocked you out, and I was not relieved if I didn't see you wake up. Oh, that's it. Naruto nodded, pretending to be enlightened. Do you know why I did this? Xia Li asked after thinking about it. Although Naruto shouldn't mind anything, he felt that he still had to explain. Well, you seem to say that if you don't become a ninja, you are not qualified to be your friend, but I feel that what you said is not true. Naruto scratched his head. Of course it's not true, but since you feel it, why are you still fighting so hard? Xia Li rolled his eyes at Naruto, suddenly realized something, stared at Naruto and asked. Naruto hesitated and couldn't tell the reason. In the end, he just said, I don't know. Anyway, I just feel that I have to work hard. Even if there is only a slight possibility, it won't work. Are you afraid that what he said is true? Xia Li looked at Naruto deeply inside. The other party was more sensitive to this than he thought. Putting himself in his shoes, Xia Li could probably guess how Naruto felt after hearing that sentence at that time. I'm sorry, this time it's my fault. I shouldn't say that, even if it's not true. Xia Li said seriously. This time it was his fault. Naruto is too simple now, and he, an old guy, actually used such words to force the other party. Xia Li didn't want to use any excuses to explain himself, because he suddenly realized that the words "I'm doing this for your own good" were so inappropriate for such a pure Naruto at this time. What's the difference between such words and those parents in the previous life who always said they were doing it for your own good? Oh, it seems that he has nothing to do with Naruto. Anyway, if you are wrong, you have to apologize. Hey. Xia Li didn't do anything wrong, why should he apologize? Naruto scratched his head, he was a little confused. If you don't understand, then don't try to understand. Xia Li said after a moment of silence. Oh. Xia Li also began to talk about the reasons why he did that and why he beat Naruto like this. So Xia Li did it for my own good. Naruto scratched his head, he had an indescribable feeling, that was the warm feeling of being cared for, but this kind of care was a little strange. Almost, but even if you have a strong recovery ability, don't be too strong in the future, take a break when you feel the limit, don't faint directly like today. Xia Li said. Is my recovery ability really strong? Isn't it the same for everyone? Naruto thought about it and asked a question that made Xia Li want to beat him up. Since you have recovered, come out with me, I will teach you some exercise movements. After resisting the urge to beat him up, Xia Li stood up and walked out the door. Soon, Xia Li looked at Naruto's movements in front of him with a satisfied look in his eyes. Sure enough, compared with teaching Naruto theoretical knowledge, teaching this kind of physical movements is much easier, and Naruto's physical talent is much higher than his consciousness talent. As for whether making Naruto stronger will change a lot of plots, Xia Li thinks this kind of thing is not important at all. Because he can't remember too many plots. Moreover, from the beginning, when a person named Shendaquan Xia Li appeared in this world, the plot has changed. It is basically meaningless to cling to the plot that is not clearly remembered. Xia Li thinks that the most important thing about those memories is that he can use them to determine the personalities of many people, such as Iruka. Why did he go to Iruka instead of the gentle teacher Mizuki? Isn't it because he knows Iruka's personality? His identity as a student makes him basically not worry about the other party harming him, so he can do it without scruples. Similarly, the same is true for Kai. Xia Li knows that the other party likes hardworking people. Even if there is no Xiao Li, he goes to Kai to ask for physical skills, and the other party probably won't refuse, not to mention Xiao Li is also there, and the other party doesn't need to worry about designing his existence. In fact, they were the only ones Xia Li could feel absolutely at ease with, including Iruka's students and the passionate Might Guy. Xia Li had no intention of looking for anyone else, for example, Hatake Kakashi. Although I know that he is a good person, his personality is such that if you are a stranger, he may not pay attention to you. Even if he pays attention to you, he will not completely believe you. It is basically a thankless task to go to Kakashi, and he is far less reliable than Iruka and Might Guy. These are valuable treasures for people's cognition. As for those plots, it would be better if you can remember them, but it doesn't matter if you can't remember them. As long as you are strong enough at that time, there is nothing to worry about. Okay, let's stop here today. Naruto, remember to keep exercising every day in the future. Xia Li clapped his hands and attracted Naruto's attention and said, "Well, I will work hard." Naruto said and looked at Xia Li with some expectation. Will Xia Li come here again in the future? Why come here? Do you want me to beat you? Xia Li teased. Not impossible. Naruto grinned and laughed. Okay, I will come to check your exercise situation when I have time later. Xia Li thought about it and agreed. Great. Naruto cheered. Xia Li looked at Naruto and did not invite Naruto to join him in Xiao Li's training ground. It was actually a public training ground. Although there were not many people, there were still some. It was just that he and Xiao Li who persisted to the end every time, so, it was not suitable for Naruto to go to that place. At this time, Naruto looked at the sky and touched his stomach. Suddenly his eyes lit up and he looked at Xia Li and said, "Xia Li, I will treat you to delicious food." What delicious food? Xia Li thought of those instant noodles and suddenly had a bad premonition. My special edition pork bone instant noodles that I have treasured for a long time. I knew it. Xia Li patted his forehead. He was busy for so long, and in the end he treated him to instant noodles. However, Xia Li stayed in the end. After all, although it was instant noodles, it should be Naruto's most precious collection. More importantly, he had told his mother before that he might not go back for dinner, and he had no worries. Seeing Naruto's happy look, he naturally would not spoil the fun. Then, I have to say that after eating instant noodles for a long time, Xia Li felt that the taste was not bad. Chapter 32 Conflict. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Recently, Xia Li felt a little overwhelmed because Naruto's progress was too fast. With his guidance, he made full use of his strong recovery ability. Each exercise basically had to break through a limit before stopping, and this led to Naruto's rapid progress in physique. Xia Li looked at Naruto's progress and thought, could he have accidentally released a monster? However, Naruto's progress soon slowed down. It should be because the effect of the previous few times was too good. After all aspects of the body came up, the effect was good, but the speed of improvement was not that great. Having said that, even if it slowed down, it was much faster than ordinary people. Naruto's physical condition is much better than Xiao Li. Xia Li smacked his mouth and felt that if it continued like this, Naruto would only be a little strong in physical skills. Thinking of this, Xia Li couldn't help but want to look at Naruto, and then saw the empty seat next to him. He was almost used to it. It was estimated that Naruto would be late again. In terms of being late, Naruto is already a habitual offender. Suddenly, a figure rushed into the classroom and ran straight towards Xia Li. Ino, what's wrong? Xia Li looked at the panting Ino and couldn't help but be a little surprised. Usually, Ino was quite ladylike, which was completely different from the one in front of her who was holding the table with both hands and panting. Xia Li, it's bad. I just went to the bathroom and found that Naruto was bullied by the seniors. Ino said breathlessly. Xia Li's face changed. He was in the state of shadow clone and basically couldn't help, but he still asked, tell me the location. In the grove behind the school playground. Ino also answered quickly. There. Xia Li was a little confused. Why did Naruto appear in that place, and then suddenly realized that it was probably Naruto who was going to be late again, and wanted to take a shortcut to come here and was discovered by those students. Xia Li, should we go find the teacher? Ino suddenly remembered at this time that she hadn't told the teacher yet. The first moment she saw this scene, she thought of Xia Li and ran over. Well, go find Mr. Iruka. Xia Li thought about it and said, then stood up and rushed out of the classroom. At this time, Ino also thought about where Mr. Iruka should be. The first class is not Mr. Iruka's class, but he should still be in the office, right? Thinking of this, Ino ran to the office again. Shikamaru also stood up from lying on the table at this time, and frowned. He naturally heard what Ino said. Naruto was bullied. And he was bullied by seniors, which is a bit troublesome. However, fortunately, Ino had gone to find Mr. Iruka. Now, Shikamaru frowned and sighed. Sure enough, he had to go over to take a look. Chosi, Kiba, our classmates were bullied. Shikamaru shouted to Chosi and Kiba next to him. Dincy was eating snacks there, and there was no movement, but Kiba, who had a bad temper, slammed the table and yelled, What? Someone dared to bully my classmate? Where is it? Who was bullied? It should be over there in the playground. It seems that Naruto was bullied. Shikamaru said calmly. Naruto. Suddenly, Kiba hesitated for a moment. He seemed to have nothing to do with him, and his family had reminded him to stay away from him. Oh, you don't seem to have a good relationship with that guy. Shikamaru said in a somewhat irritating tone. Even if the relationship is not good, you can't let that guy be bullied by outsiders. Let's go. Kiba was stimulated, and suddenly his mind was much clearer. He shouted and rushed out first. Shikamaru glanced at the classroom again and said with a click of his tongue. Kiba's loud voice had almost spread throughout the classroom, but at this time, few people were willing to stand up and follow. Most people looked like it was none of their business after hearing that it was Naruto. Shikamaru sighed. The plan was a small success. He originally wanted to use Kiba to encourage more people, but it seemed that it would not work. However, at least Kiba was still there. Chosi, let's follow him too. Shikamaru said and dragged Chosi outside. Chosi did not resist much. He had no ill feelings towards Naruto, and he often accompanied him to stand in punishment. He should help him, but Naruto was mostly punished for being late, and Chosi was because he ate snacks in class. What Shikamaru didn't know was that when they walked out, Sasuke also looked at the seat behind him, thought for a while, and put his hands in his pockets, and walked out of the class slowly. Not only Sasuke, but Shino, who was wearing sunglasses and half of his face covered by clothes, also followed silently. Naruto-kun. Hinata Hyuga's 2 index fingers were entangled. She was also very worried about Naruto's situation. She looked around and it seemed that no one noticed her, so she stood up and ran towards the playground through the classroom like a little transparent. Xia Li naturally didn't know these. The moment he rushed out of the classroom, he released his shadow clone and sent the news that Naruto was bullied back to his main body. Although Xia Li chose a training place not far from the school in order to transmit more chakra back after the shadow clone contact, it still took some time. Fortunately, Xia Li clenched his fists and his eyes flashed. He had just finished warming up and had not yet exercised to the point of exhaustion. His combat power was at its peak. Dare to bully his good son, no, good friend, it's simply courting death. Xia Li ran towards the school at a very fast speed. After exercising all night yesterday, Naruto also felt a little tired and sleepy. When he woke up, he found that it was already very late. this made Naruto hang up a piece of bread and drink a few mouthfuls of milk and run towards the school, but just like that, he couldn't avoid the fate of being late, so he had to take a shortcut, and just when he was about to reach the school and broke through the grove and rushed to the main road, he almost hit someone, although he didn't hit him. It also scared Naruto and the other party. Sorry. Naruto apologized first, and then thought that time was running out and wanted to leave directly, and the person who was almost hit patted his chest and breathed a sigh of relief. He was almost hit, and when he saw the familiar figure of the other party, he immediately became timid. What? I thought it was someone rampaging here. It turns out to be you, a monster. That's not surprising. Suddenly, Naruto stopped in his tracks, turned back and stared at the man, anger in his eyes. I'm not a monster. Huh, it would be strange if you weren't a monster. Didn't you see that the adults all called you a monster? The man continued, and couldn't help laughing, and his companions had obviously heard of this kind of thing, and they all laughed, monster, monster. The smiles on those people's faces and the words in their mouths made Naruto grit his teeth very tightly. Maybe he shouldn't do it, but he couldn't help it, even if he was late, even if he was beaten again, he couldn't swallow this breath if he didn't do it. So Naruto rushed up, but he was alone, and he was not even older than the other party. Even though Naruto had been training for a few days under Xia Li's teaching, it was impossible for him to surpass the senior students who had grown 2 or 3 years more than him. He was knocked to the ground in a short while and was surrounded and laughed at. So this is all you can do as a monster? You're not that great. Everyone, come and see, this is the monster in our village, I defeated him. Chapter 33 Fight at Ninja School. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Chapter 33, Ninja School Fight Incident. That it was like this again. Naruto instinctively protected the important parts of his body, and then felt the fists and kicks falling on him. Naruto was used to this kind of treatment, not only being attacked but also being laughed at. No one would sympathize with him. The adults saw this and some were even happy to see it. It was precisely because the adults didn't stop these guys who beat people that they were so arrogant. After bullying him, he didn't feel any guilt at all. Instead, he would laugh and compare with others. The good and evil of human nature will be particularly pure during this period, and during this period, the teachings of adults are particularly important for the growth of children. It was precisely because of the adults' indulgence in bullying Naruto that this scene happened, and it was not the end. Naruto was actually used to it and it didn't matter anymore. A beating would be over quickly, but he would definitely be late again today. In fact, most of the lateness was due to Naruto getting up late, but some of the time it was because of accidents on the way to school, especially when coming from the main road. Hey! What are you guys doing? At this time, a shout came from a distance, making Naruto's heart tremble, and he involuntarily turned his head to look in the direction from which the sound came. There, a person who often stood with him appeared in sight, Inuzuka Kiba, and there seemed to be someone else behind him. Although Naruto felt physical pain, his eyes were very bright at this time. He looked at it for a long time, and then found, Xia Li, aren't you here? Suddenly, Naruto didn't know what he was feeling. At this moment, he seemed to feel empty in his heart. No, maybe Xia Li didn't know. But they all knew it, and even the lazy Shikamaru knew it. Wouldn't Xia Li know it? Naruto was looking for reasons for the other party in his heart, but he couldn't help but feel sad. Ha! Boy, don't meddle in other people's business. The senior said, staring at Inuzuka Kiba fiercely. What do you mean by being nosy? He is our classmate. Inuzuka Kiba glared back like a hound. Well, seniors, class is about to begin, can it end here? Shikamaru took Inuzuka Kiba back and looked at Naruto's condition. There was also a cold glint in the dead fish's eyes, ready to move. However, Shikamaru was a little confused. Xia Li was obviously the first one to go out, but there was no Xia Li around. Was he looking in the wrong place or hiding? As for escaping, Shikamaru hadn't thought about it that way. He didn't usually feel like such a person. Class. You're already late anyway. It won't matter if you go a little later. How can class be as important as fighting monsters? The senior said and laughed together with the others. Suddenly, Kiba and Shikamaru's expressions changed. You bastards! Ye could not hold back his temper. If Shikamaru hadn't pulled him, he would have rushed forward. There was some sweat on Shikamaru's forehead. He compared the size difference between the people on his side and the other side. The other side was probably a 3rd or 4th grade student, and there were more people than here. If they really wanted to fight, they would be terrible. Very disadvantageous. Huh? How dare you scold us? You guys have definitely degenerated into the monster's minions. Maybe that class has been completely controlled by this monster. Monster, can you only say monster? Yo was a little irritated, and turned to look at Shikamaru, wanting Shikamaru to let him go. Hey, you don't need to help me. At this time, Naruto still didn't see Xia Li's figure, and his eyes were a little dim, but when he saw that the others were about to conflict with these big guys, he still couldn't help shouting. Shut up, who said I was going to help you? If we back down from the current situation, it will be a shame for our first-year group. You retorted unceremoniously. At this time, Aburame Shino and Uchiha Sasuke had also arrived at the scene. After hearing what had just been said, they stood silently behind the first-year group and expressed their attitude. Shikamaru naturally noticed this scene, and a smile appeared on his lips. It seemed that this class was better than he thought. In this case, the gap in the number of people is not that big. Although it is basically impossible to win, there is already some confidence. Senior, the current situation is that even if you win, you will only be considered as bullying the weak, so can we just stop here this time? Shikamaru silently calculated the combat power, and it was still insufficient. If it would be best if it ended like this. Huh? The senior looked around. Unknowingly, many people were already looking at them, and these guys didn't know when the number of people coming was almost the same as them. As Shikamaru said, even if they beat the first-year guys, they would be said to be bullying the weak, but if they just leave like this, it would look very embarrassing. You guys have definitely been deceived by this monster. We are here to help you get rid of the deception. The man suddenly had a flash of inspiration and said loudly. After finding an excuse for the people on his side, he immediately took action. The little kid in front of me is too annoying. If he continues talking, there will definitely be problems. It is better to take action immediately and not give the other party time to continue talking. Tisk, it's too much trouble. After seeing this, Shikamaru stopped wasting words. It was completely useless for these people. The other party just wanted to bully the weak. No matter what he said, it would be useless. So, it's useless to reason with these bastards. After complaining, Kiba saw that Shikamaru was no longer pulling him, and immediately ignored the size difference and went forward. Shikamaru curled his lips and saw the current situation, saying, Choji, let's go too. Oh, okay, it's time to go. Akimichi Choji didn't know when he had put away the snacks. When he saw Naruto being bullied, he wanted to take action. After all, he was a good partner in standing in the punishment. If Naruto was not there, wouldn't he have to stand there alone? After all, although there were a few people in the punishment group, Naruto was basically a regular, and others might not stand together occasionally. Aburame Shino didn't say anything all the time, silently blocking in front of a person. Sasuke stood in front of a person coldly, mocking, it's not good to bully the weak, let me be your opponent. Everyone. Naruto didn't know what to say at this moment, and felt his eyes moist. They all came to help him, and he couldn't go on like this. He had to fight with them. However, the reality is that soon, the first-year group retreated completely. After all, although they all came from the family and had some combat training, they had never been in actual combat. The senior students have already received practical training, and more importantly, their bodies that have developed for a few more years are simply not comparable to those of the first-year students in terms of size and strength. You must know that the most important growth at this age is development. Development is the main thing, and exercise is supplementary. Any exercise cannot affect the development of this period. It can be said that at this period, the competition is particularly simple, that is, strength and size, and everyone needs to continue to exercise in terms of skills. However, there are also two outstanding existences. Although Sasuke is a little struggling, he really drags the opponent head-on. In the case of some gaps in strength and speed, it is indeed a descendant of a famous family, and it is not in vain. Another one is Shino Aburame. He is not strong in combat power, but in his bugs. After all, although the opponent is a senior student, he is also a child. He was scared pale in front of so many bugs. Shino Aburame was even able to find time to help the people next to him. Unfortunately, even so, the combat power of the first-year students is still much worse. Shikamaru, Choji, Kiba and Naruto are not opponents, and their bodies are slowly turning purple. Damn, where is that guy Xia Li? If he is here, he should be about the same as Sasuke. He can definitely hold everyone back until the teacher comes. Shikamaru couldn't help complaining at this time, looking at the two extra people on the opposite side, smacking his mouth. If there were not one or two more people, maybe with Sasuke and Shino, they could really win. However, Shino seemed quite transparent at ordinary times, but I didn't expect him to be so strong. However, it was useless. I guess he will be beaten hard today. It's all because of Xia Li. At this time, Naruto was a little surprised when he saw the little girl with white eyes who ran to his side to help him and was usually shy when he saw him. Although he didn't know why the other party was here, he must have come to help him, and he couldn't let her get hurt. Naruto made up his mind and stopped around Hinata to protect her. Hinata finally decided to come out to help Naruto, but she found that she seemed to be the one being protected again. She felt a little disappointed, but she also felt that Naruto was really reliable. Soon, Naruto seemed to feel something, turned his head and looked in one direction. His eyes were bright, because he felt a familiar breath. Hold on, I'm coming. At this time, Xia Li finally arrived at the scene, looking at the scene with some surprise. He didn't expect there would be so many people, but looking at their injuries, his eyes completely turned cold. The next moment, Xia Li joined the battlefield. You guy, you finally came. Ye said with a bruised face. He was the one who was hit the hardest, but Ye looked at the tooth marks on the other party's body and laughed a few times. The other party was not much better. As for Shikamaru, he looked at the direction where Xia Li came from with some confusion. Why did the other party come from that direction? Before Shikamaru could think more, he was punched in the face for being distracted. After all, he was not very good at physical skills and he was distracted. Soon, Shikamaru stopped thinking and rushed forward viciously, and the people on the opposite side also regretted it. Why did this man become more and more, and he was just like Xiaoqiang, he could not be defeated no matter what. Sure enough, they were all monsters. When Xia Li first entered school, his chakra was equivalent to that of a third-year student, which meant that Xia Li's physical fitness was almost at the level of a third-year student at that time. Although exercise was supplementary, who told Xia Li to start exercising early enough? And more than half a semester has passed. Xia Li will not stand still, and he has also realized that lightning escape massage has further accelerated the speed of physical progress. His current physical fitness is not worse than those seniors in front of him, and even slightly higher. The most important thing is that Xia Li is not like Naruto and others. His combat experience can be honed in the battle with Shaoli, and he is proficient in using the three-body technique. Isn't it easy to deal with some students? Even the three-body technique cannot be used. In comparison, although the students opposite are senior students, they are still here at this time, and they are also some who are not very good at studying. Although they have learned the three-body technique, they are basically not able to do anything except the transformation technique. It can be used, it can only be said that their advantage is really only the developmental advantage formed by being a few years older. They can use their advantage to fight against other people, but facing Xia Li. Ever since Xia Li joined the flock like a tiger, and within a few rounds, the advantage between the first and third graders was completely reversed: dodge, then punch. If the punch fails and then kick, he can directly knock down the next person, leaving the other first-year student stunned. Are you sure this person is in the same first grade as us, not a senior, and is also a top student? Naruto's eyes twitched a little when he saw this scene. How could he see the image of him being beaten by Xia Li from this scene, but it seemed to be a little different. This is too perverted, isn't it? The opponent hasn't used his full strength in the midterm assessment, right? Shikamaru twitched his lips when he saw this scene. He would have come here with Xia Li if he had known it, right? Shikamaru frowned. If he had this strength, Xia Li wouldn't need to wait until this time to take action, and the direction the opponent just came from. No way. Shikamaru looked at Xia Li's figure and suddenly felt that if it was indeed the same as he guessed, then it would not be surprising that the other party could reach this level, but why work so hard? Although there is nothing wrong with trying hard, how did the other party persist when they were the same age as them? Sasuke also watched this scene, and suddenly realized that the gap between himself and the first place may be greater than he imagined. Looking at Xia Li's meticulous dodge and efficient and quick punches, the corners of his eyes felt a little sour. This how can he catch up with the huge gap? No, you can't lose confidence. You are the descendant of Uchiha, you must become the best, you must surpass him. Sasuke was cheering himself up, but the effect didn't seem to be ideal. The addition of Xia Li also made the first graders slowly retract their hands. After all, Xia Li had already snatched everyone away, and now most of them were lying on the ground moaning. There's one more for you. Xia Li waved his hand. This level of training was really not even a warm-up, much worse than Xiao Li's. The man looked at his moaning companion lying on the ground, and he didn't understand. Why did the situation change in a moment after this man came over, even though he had a big advantage just now? Weird, monster. The man couldn't help shouting. He was only in the first grade and yet he became like this. What is he if he wasn't a monster? How could a human being defeat a monster? Xia Li paused for a moment. He was also called a monster, just like Naruto, but the meanings between the two monsters were probably different. However, these two words also made Xia Li smile brightly at him. Thanks for the compliment. Hearing these words, the man couldn't stand it anymore. Fear showed in his eyes. He turned around and ran away, abandoning his companion lying on the ground. The next moment, Xia Li also moved, running out like a wild horse, quickly approaching the fleeing person. No, don't come over. The other party's voice was already trembling. However, none of this stopped Xia Li's steps. There was a constant chill in his eyes. Didn't you think about this scene when you bullied Naruto? Iruka's voice seemed to be heard in Xia Li's ears, as if he was shouting to him to stop, but stop. How is it possible? Xia Li quickly caught up with the man, who had no will to resist at all. He was frightened after being caught up by Xia Li. After a few casual punches, Xia Li picked him up and threw him to the front. Where individuals fall, looking at his masterpiece, Xia Li grinned. Sure enough, the family would be neat and tidy. After doing all this, Xia Li looked at Iruka who rushed over angrily, smiled, and spoke first. Sorry, Iruka-sensei, we seem to have caused you trouble. Chapter 36 The Great Devil of the First Grade. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Chapter 36, The First Grade Demon King. Xia Li, are you okay? When a group of people returned to the classroom, Ino had been waiting there in front of the classroom. She was anxious and had no intention of going into class. Xia Li is fine, but we are in trouble. Shikamaru couldn't help complaining. Well, it's nothing serious. Ino did a great job. Teacher Iruka came just in time. Xia Li said. That's good. Ino breathed a sigh of relief and laughed. She was scared to death before. Okay, let's go in and go to class. At this time, Ino didn't know what the specific progress of the matter was, but she was a little confused when she saw that Xia Li was not injured, and the other people looked a little miserable. However, this puzzlement was soon answered. As the saying goes, good things don't go out, and bad things spread thousands of miles. Xia Li didn't expect that this incident would spread so quickly. However, it is not incomprehensible. After all, they were not the only people present at the time. There were also some people who were watching the excitement and did not mind the matter. Those who were beaten would naturally not spread the news because it was embarrassing, but these people who were watching the excitement would not spread the news. People who have money to talk about will not waste it easily, so, soon, the news that a big demon appeared in the first grade spread throughout the ninja school, and during this period, Ino also understood why Xia Li was so clean. It turned out that he was not only so good in exams, but also in battles. Strong. As a ninja reserve, everyone did not think about what should not be fought. Instead, they saw that Xia Li's combat power exceeded that of a fourth-grade student. Although it probably only exceeded the level of a crane, it was already very big. Awesome. No, Ino looked at Xia Li, who was once again surrounded, and puffed up her cheeks. She also wanted to squeeze in, but she had no time. However, Xia Li probably wouldn't pay attention to others, and it wouldn't be too late to go find him after the heat of the matter subsides. Thinking of this, Ino's mood suddenly improved again. Looking at the people surrounding Xia Li's seat, a sense of superiority in her heart became stronger and stronger. Why are you surrounded so tightly? Xia Li won't pay attention to you anyway, Xia Li was also very helpless about this. The enthusiasm for the midterm assessment had finally dissipated, and now something like this happened again, which made Xia Li feel that if she did it a few more times, her popularity in the class might not be able to dissipate. At this time, Xia Li couldn't help but sigh, the same as Shikamaru. Trouble. As usual, Xia Li still maintained the character of not paying attention to anyone she didn't know before, but this time it was obviously not as effective as the last time. What left Xia Li speechless the most was that when she went to the training ground after school, even people like Xiao Li who didn't pay attention to many things heard about it. Xia Li, you are so amazing, your story is being spread throughout the school. Xiao Li said enviously. Fortunately, in fact, Xiao Li, you can do this if you are here. Xia Li said a little helplessly. Well, but Xia Li, are you actually in the first grade? Xiao Li asked again at this time. That's right. Xia Li couldn't help but rolled her eyes. Didn't this person just react now? First grade is 1 year younger than me. So Xia Li has worked very hard since she was very young. Well, I can't fall behind. Xia Li, let's fight. Xiao Li, there was fire in his eyes. Okay, it just so happens that my amount of exercise today is far from the standard. Xia Li looked at Xiao Li and said. One of the advantages of exercising with Xiao Li is that he will never lose his enthusiasm for exercise. The next day, the Hokage's office, the third generation, is looking at the report of yesterday's incident. Such a somewhat nasty incident will naturally be written into a report and submitted to the third generation, and the person who wrote the report is Iruka. The third generation looked at the details of the events described in the scroll, and couldn't help but sigh after seeing what happened to Naruto. With a somewhat complicated mood, should Naruto's identity be disclosed at the beginning? Shouldn't he listen to Danzo's words? He hesitated at that time, and even with this hesitation, Danzo had time to act. It was already too late for him to do anything else. Besides, until the end, he still had not made a decision, and in the end he could only acquiesce in Danzo's actions. However, there was no time for Sandai to reminisce. Things had already happened. It was too late to say anything now, so he continued reading. When he saw that Xia Li did not take action immediately, he thought about the scene he had seen with the telescope before and suddenly realized that the shadow clone should have dissipated and let the main body rush over to waste time. Then, there was the scene that the third generation saw, but the subsequent development of the matter was a bit beyond his expectation. Did Xia Li actually force the other party to apologize to Naruto? Can you actually do this for Naruto? Sandai smiled. From this point of view, there was nothing wrong with the other party's character. Naruto found his own bond in the school, and in contrast, Xia Li also left his own bond in the school. The big demon king of the first grade, ho ho. The third generation smiled at this title and then began to think deeply. Maybe there was no need to wait for Jiraiya to come back. What was troublesome for the third generation was that he was not sure when Jiraiya would come back. Is it possible to waste Xia Li's talent during this period of time? The third generation was thinking, staring at the things on the scroll for a long time. If he cultivated bonds, he wouldn't be able to let Xia Li graduate early, but he couldn't waste his talent either. The third generation slowly stood up, knocked his pipe on the table, and then came to the window, looking at the Hokage rock in the distance, staring at the familiar face, as if he saw a familiar figure, and then the figure slowly turned into Naruto's appearance, and finally turned into Xia Li's appearance. At this time, the third generation sighed deeply. Fourth generation. At this moment, the third generation also made a decision, and then returned to his seat. He naturally had more than one thing to deal with. Soon, the door of the office was opened again, and a man with a cane and a white cloth wrapped around one eye walked in. It was Danzo. Hiruzen, you also know about the demon fox, right? I said a long time ago that he should not be allowed to go to the ninja school, and should have been handed over to our root. Danzo said as soon as he came over, as if Naruto had done something unforgivable. Okay, Naruto did nothing wrong in this matter. The third generation waved his hand and looked at Danzo, not thinking that the other party came here just to talk about Naruto. As expected, Danzo, who was rejected again, did not change his expression. He thought in his heart that the third generation had already known about this matter, but he still said, Hiruzen, even if the demon fox cannot give us, the roots also need nutrition. Soon, the third generation knew who Danzo's target this time was, naturally Xia Li, who had already shown his talent. Danzo could probably infer Xia Li's talent level just from this incident, which was not inferior to Kakashi before, and the third generation, who had specific information, knew that Xia Li's talent was probably even higher than Kakashi. Don't say it, this is impossible. The third generation refused directly without hesitation. Hiruzen. You will ruin him like this. With his talent, the school is no longer suitable for him. Danzo roared in a low voice, trying to force the third generation. I know whether it's suitable or not. There's no need to talk about it. The third generation looked at Danzo. Although he couldn't say that he knew everything about the root, he certainly knew a thing or two. He was also clear about the experiences of the ninjas who joined the root. In the past, he had always turned a blind eye. But now Danzo wanted to reach out to Xia Li. No, even if it wasn't Xia Li, no one in the ninja school could do it. The people trained there were the future of the village. Humph. Danzo understood the third generation's determination when he saw this, and it seemed that Xia Li had already been noticed by the third generation. He snorted coldly and left the Hokage's office. After Danzo left, the third generation seemed to be a little older and sighed deeply. Finally, the third generation seemed to have thought of something and knocked on the table. Then, in an instant, a figure wearing a mask appeared in the third generation's office again. Sinai frowned as he listened to the discussion of his colleagues around him. His Xia Li had a fight. And he even got the title of the first-year Demon King. Colleagues around her all expressed their envy of her son, saying that he was so good and would definitely be very capable in the future, but Shinai was not very happy. In her opinion, fighting was wrong, not to mention fighting at such a young age. Shinai also asked about the reason for the fight, but although the matter was spread among the parents of the students of the ninja school in a small range, the specific reason of the matter naturally could not spread so quickly, and the main thing that spread was Xia Li's reputation. Shinai, who did not find out the reason, was even more troubled. Although she thought that her son would not deliberately bully others, she was still a little unsure and a little absent-minded. She wanted to go home quickly to ask Xia Li what was going on. So, at night, at Xia Li's house, Xia Li was sitting in front of Shinai at this time, telling the reason and process of the matter. He was also a little helpless. How could this matter spread so quickly? It even reached his mother's ears. When he came back, he saw Shinai with a serious face and thought something had happened. After listening to Xia Li's narration, Shinai's expression eased. Although he believed that his son would not bully others before, he was still uncertain without confirmation. So, you did it to help the bullied classmate, right? Shinai confirmed. Yes. Xia Li nodded. If that's the case, then you did it right. It's right for classmates to help each other. Shinai breathed a sigh of relief. It's good that his son didn't learn bad things. But the bullied person you mentioned is called Uzumaki Naruto? Shinai hesitated for a while and asked again. Yes, he is my desk mate. Xia Li nodded, did not deny it, but said a closer relationship. Are you friends? Shinai frowned. Well, I guess so. Xia Li nodded. Although he felt that Naruto had raised a good son, the other party should treat him as a friend. Is that so? Shinai didn't know what to say for a while. Mom, is there a problem? Naruto and I get along very well and I feel he's not the monster as the rumors say. Xia Li took the initiative to say this. He didn't want his mother to look at Naruto the same way as other villagers. You have heard those rumors, but I don't think he is a monster. It's just that if you make friends with him, it will be troublesome. Many people don't like that kid. Although I think he is pitiful, it's better not to provoke him. Sinai hesitated for a moment and then thought of Xia Li, who was always precocious, so he said his thoughts. Xia Li was also relieved. Sinai didn't hate Naruto for no reason like other people. This is the most normal idea. Except for those villagers whose families were killed by the nine-tailed fox and whose property was destroyed, this kind of thinking should be the most normal. They are not sure whether Naruto is a demon fox, and it has nothing to do with them. It has been so long, there is no hatred or resentment. Anyway, don't touch it and cause trouble. As for this trouble, on the one hand, there are those villagers who hate Naruto, and on the other hand, there are naturally guys with ulterior motives. Mom, I can be sure that Naruto is fine. He is a companion I recognize. Xia Li said to Sinai seriously. Sinai looked at Xia Li, nodded, and said, since you know what's going on, then let's do it, but it's better not to play together in the village, otherwise you might be pointed at. Well, I know this. Xia Li nodded. He went to Naruto's remote home and school. The village has formed a tacit understanding that Naruto will not take the initiative to find anyone. That's good. By the way, how about you try this? Sinai said as he trotted into the house and took out a light yellow turtleneck sweater. Try it on to see if it fits. If it doesn't fit, I'll modify it. Xia Li took the sweater, paused, and looked up at Sinai. Sinai smiled and said, this is a gift for your midterm exam. Xia Li opened his mouth, but said nothing in the end. This sweater should have been knitted by Sinai bit by bit, and he was not at home most of the time, so he never found out that Sinai was knitting a sweater for him. He had clearly said before that there was no need to prepare a gift for him. Soon, Xia Li put on the sweater, which felt just right and warm. Hee, it seems that my skills and taste have not declined. Looking at Xia Li wearing the sweater, Shinai nodded with satisfaction. Not only did it fit him, but it was also obviously much more handsome. It was true that clothes make the man. It was a pity that the family had no spare money to buy Xia Li other new clothes, otherwise, Shinai would have to find a day to take Xia Li to the street to buy, dress up his son well, and guarantee that he would fascinate a lot of little fans. His son was so handsome and so strong, it was normal for him to have a lot of little fans. Hee. Chapter 37, Survival Wisdom and First Place. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Unlike the happy family at Xia Li's house, Mr. Kawachi walked dejectedly from the Hokage's office to his own home. He did not go to the Hokage to complain, but was called there by the Umbu. Then, the Hokage had a very cordial exchange and heart-to-heart talk with Mr. Kawachi. Although it seemed that he was encouraging him not to care about what happened yesterday, Mr. Kawachi was not young anymore, and he was old and wise. And he also understood the meaning of the third generation, wasn't it? Just asking him not to cause trouble for Xia Li, worried that Xia Li would bring harm to the village. Although he felt a little sad, Mr. Kawachi naturally expressed that he would not cause trouble for Xia Li, and then the third generation let him leave with satisfaction. In fact, Mr. Kawachi never thought of taking revenge on Xia Li. Not to mention that he was also a teacher. He had lived in Konoha for so long, what else could he not see? Wasn't it just a loss of face? Compared with his own life, what's the point of worrying about it? The other party is so talented that he will become a big man sooner or later in the future. Even if he can't become a big man, he can become a strong enough ninja. At least it's easy to kill him, so, Mr. Kawachi is not stupid. A teacher who can't be more ordinary still has some survival wisdom. At most, he will discuss the other party a little within the scope allowed by the rules. For example, if he is responsible for the graduation exam, he will definitely let Xia Li draw the substitution technique as the assessment ninjutsu for the graduation exam. However, Mr. Kawachi feels that even if this is the case, it will not be difficult for the other party. What can he do? At most, he can discuss the other party, and he can't offend the other party. There is no super genius in the class to help him vent his anger. At this time, Mr. Kawachi couldn't help but sigh deeply. He really envied Iruka. Time passed quickly, and Xia Li also practiced step by step, and what made Xia Li most helpless during this period of time was that his title of the first-year Big Devil seemed to be irremovable. During this period, another incident happened, and just when his reputation was about to fade, the protagonist this time was not Naruto, but Akimichi Choji, and Xia Li felt that they were not right, because, after seeing Choji, the other party just casually said that he was fat. Then the furious Choji went straight to the other party to make trouble. Although it is a bit impolite to discuss other people's fatness, Xia Li looked at Choji's figure and it seemed that what the other party said was not wrong, but even if he knew that he was not right, Xia Li decided to help Choji. After all, he was his own man. At most, he would take Choji to apologize after the matter was resolved. However, when Xia Li arrived, the other party's people quickly recognized Xia Li's identity, and the other party's anger slowly dissipated, thinking about whether they could beat Xia Li. In the end, it felt that they probably couldn't beat him. Even if they won, the other party was a freshman and felt no sense of accomplishment. If they lost, they would be embarrassed in school like those people before. This was not worth it at all, so they chose to stop and reason. Xia Li was also happy about this. What if his reputation rises again? You know, there are still some people around him now, which is very troublesome. In the end, Dingxi apologized to those people, saying that he shouldn't be so impulsive, and the person who said that Dingxi was fat also apologized and said that he shouldn't say that. However, at the end, the man looked at Dingxi's body shape and couldn't help but said again, "But you are really fat." Suddenly, Dingxi was furious again and wanted to do it again, but was directly dragged away by Xia Li and his group. "You bastard, I call it plump, not fat." While being dragged away, Dingxi was still shouting there, leaving these senior students speechless. Plump? What's the difference between this word and fat for boys? Originally, Xia Li thought that this matter would never spread again, but he was naive. Soon, Xia Li's reputation for winning without fighting spread, and then Xia Li looked at his seat surrounded by people again, and his face darkened. Well, he didn't want to say anything. Anyway, he was getting used to it slowly. Instead of thinking about these, it's better to read more books to cope with the upcoming final exam. Although Xia Li had already read these, in order to avoid forgetting some knowledge points, he still chose to review them for the first place in all aspects. There was nothing special about the final exam of the first grade. Sure enough, that guy is still the overwhelming first place. Shikamaru looked at Xia Li next to him and sighed. He was convinced by the other party's efforts. After that incident, Shikamaru carefully observed Xia Li, and he also specifically asked his father if there was any ninjutsu that could be learned with clones. The answer is that there is, and the level of that ninjutsu is not low and the side effects are not low, so Shikamaru was sure that Xia Li came over every day as a shadow clone, and the rotation was probably at Iruka's place. After all, he would go there once every time he had extracurricular training. Shikamaru was a little worried at first, but seeing that Xia Li was in normal condition every day and that teacher Iruka didn't stop him, he felt relieved. Maybe the other party had some method that didn't require him to worry about side effects. Anyway, even if there were no side effects, Shikamaru felt that he would not use it. It was already very troublesome, so using a shadow clone would be twice as troublesome. When Xia Li looked at his results, it was not beyond his expectations, but this time in terms of theoretical results, there was another person with perfect scores besides him, and that was Sakura, who got rid of her troubles with Ino's help. He already got full marks so early. Xia Li also lamented that he was cheating in this aspect, but the other party really relied on his theoretical talent. This made Xia Li feel lucky. Fortunately, the ninja school only lasted for 6 years. He was still sure to get full marks for the 6 years of knowledge. If it was like middle school or high school in his previous life, then Xia Li felt that when her theoretical scores could no longer reach full marks, she would be surpassed by Xiaoying, who was a real top student. In terms of sports, Xia Li is still the number one in fault. No one can catch up with him. However, Sasuke, who was originally in second place, was caught up by Naruto, who cheated. After all, Naruto relied on the recovery power of the Kyuubi to make physical progress at such a speed that even Xia Li was amazed. Now if you let Naruto fight alone with the seniors who bullied him before, he will most likely be able to fight. And of course, it is still difficult for Naruto to catch up with Xia Li. After all, Xia Li has practiced for so long, longer than Naruto, and Naruto has a plug-in for 9 tails. Xia Li himself also has the blessing of thunder release, and as he progresses, the effect of Lei Dun's blessing is getting better and better. This is the reward for first place. I will definitely get it next time. Naruto said with a little envy at this time, looking at the special silver kunai in Xia Li's hand. Here. Xia Li handed the kunai to Naruto and said, I'll give it to you to play with, but I can't give it to you. As for you wanting it too, I think it's probably impossible. After all, I will always be the first. I will definitely surpass you. Naruto vowed after taking the kunai. Chapter 38, Battle Against Iruka. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Chapter 38, Battle Against Iruka. Xia Li stayed in the classroom, watching the students being picked up one by one. After all, today was the end of the first half of the first grade, and parents who usually didn't come here often came to school to pick up their children. Xia Li could have left early, but he had things to do, so he stayed in the classroom. Naruto wanted to stay in the classroom when he saw that he didn't leave, but he was driven away by him. At this time, a gaze locked on Xia Li, which made Xia Li feel a little cold. He looked up and found the other party. It should be said that the other party had no intention of hiding, just looking at Xia Li, and the happy Sasuke in front of him proved his identity, Uchiha Itachi. To be honest, Xia Li also saw Itachi for the first time, and he felt that he was indeed a little mature, and the gap between him and Sasuke was a bit big. It was not a few years difference. Xia Li looked at the other party and retracted his gaze. Although he also wanted to ask the other party directly how he thought about exterminating the clan, it was indeed impossible to think of his own strength. Is that Xia Li who defeated his brother and won the first place? Itachi also retracted his gaze. He knew his brother's character. From Sasuke's tone, he even heard a trace of admiration for Xia Li, which surprised Itachi, and he couldn't help but look at Xia Li carefully, but he didn't expect that Xia Li would soon notice it and looked up at him. Just relying on this perception, Itachi gave a very high evaluation. He was indeed a genius who could make Sasuke admire him. However, Itachi just sighed and didn't think about it anymore. He didn't have any special ideas about the genius in the village. As long as he didn't bully his brother, it would be fine. Soon, Itachi took Sasuke away. Sasuke also looked very happy. Although he kept saying that Itachi didn't need to pick up, the unstoppable happiness was not like that at all. Even the disappointment of losing to Xia Li in the exam was restored a lot. Xia Li waited until all the classmates left before he stood up, walked out of the classroom, and finally came to the training ground in the school to wait, while also adjusting his state. Soon, a figure came to the training ground. Sorry to have kept you waiting, Xia Li. Iruka scratched his head and looked at Xia Li over there. After all, it's the last day of the semester, so you must be very busy. You also have to agree to my request. Thank you very much. Xia Li said so, not caring about waiting for so long. But Xia Li is still the first in the class. Iruka laughed a few times and asked seriously, are you sure you really want to challenge the teacher? Although I'm not strong in actual combat, I'm still a chunin after all. I'm sure, I also want to try what my current limit is. Xia Li licked his lips, then looked at Iruka seriously and said, please take this battle seriously. Ah, I know. Iruka said so, but how could he be so heavy-handed? Xia Li looked at Iruka. Actually, he knew this, but he believed that the other party would take it seriously later. His progress was not small, and the amount of chakra was enough for Xia Li to use the two ninjutsu that consumed less chakra, the Akiri and the fierce wind palm, in the battle, although he still couldn't use them too much, in terms of physical condition. He also improved rapidly with the blessing of thunder release, but he still couldn't beat Xia Li. For some reason, the other party started to train harder from that day, and the amount was definitely a burden on his body. Xia Li didn't think that such training was a good thing, but after thinking about the other party's ninjutsu talent, he didn't know whether to stop it. In the end, he could only sigh. If this was the other party's choice, he couldn't say anything. "I'm going to go, Teacher Iruka." Xia Li reminded that this battle was to test the frontal combat ability, not the comprehensive ability of the ninja, so there was no need to engage in actual combat exercises, such as sneak attacks. "Okay, come on, Xia Li, let me see the strength of the first place in our class." Iruka smiled, and it seemed that he was not serious. The next moment, Xia Li rushed forward, and Iruka was also shocked by Xia Li's speed. With this speed, did the opponent hide his strength during the assessment? Before Iruka could think more, Xia Li had already rushed forward, followed by a punch without hesitation. During the several rounds of fighting, Iruka also took a deep breath, judging Xia Li's skills in his heart. The opponent was definitely not practicing alone, but had a partner to fight with. This method of attack and response was definitely not something that could be done by one person alone. Moreover, this force made Iruka feel a little pain, but it was only a little pain. Although he was very surprised by Xia Li's strength, it was completely different from that of an adult like him, so, if it was just like this, the battle would be over soon, Iruka thought, and at the same time, he resisted Xia Li's kick and grabbed Xia Li. Then he saw Xia Li instantly form 3 seals. 3 seals. For a moment, Iruka was a little confused. What kind of ninjutsu is this? Clone technique? But this is definitely not the seal of the clone technique. Iruka also became alert. The next moment, Xia Li's figure turned into a wooden stake and was knocked to the ground by Iruka. Substitution technique? Iruka's eyes narrowed slightly, and he was horrified. He couldn't help but scan the surroundings, looking for Xia Li's figure. Iruka naturally knew that the most important thing in using ninjutsu was the control of chakra, but he didn't expect Xia Li to be able to compress the substitution technique to 3 seals. He couldn't do that either, because as a teacher, Iruka naturally taught students to use the most standard 5-seal substitution technique. Soon, Iruka found Xia Li's figure, but he found not just 1, but 3. Clone technique? Iruka thought, and at this time he had to say that Xia Li had taken the lead, but he shouldn't underestimate his teacher. Although it was not streamlined, Iruka's substitution technique was very skillful and fast. Xia Li looked at the wooden stakes in front of him and didn't have any surprises. It was simply a fool's dream to want to defeat Iruka like this, so he was still not fast enough. Iruka's substitution technique lasted more than 1 second, but he didn't have time to stop it. In this way, the situation returned to the beginning again, and this time Iruka would not take it lightly like he did at the beginning, and this was what Xia Li wanted. He also collected a lot of information through the previous few rounds, which he had judged before, but now he was completely sure. First of all, in terms of strength, there is no way to make up for it unless he uses the fierce wind palm, but the fierce wind palm consumes chakra and cannot be used frequently. In terms of speed, Iruka is slower than Xia Li imagined. Although it is still about the same as Xia Li, it is enough. There is also ninjutsu. He can see Iruka's 5 seals clearly. Sure enough, the ninjutsu used by the teacher is the most standard, but the speed is not fast. After a semester of training, Xia Li's seals have exceeded 3 seals per second, so the substitution technique just now did not even take a second. In other words, his only advantage is the speed of seals and his own speed. It is indeed a bit difficult to fight. Xia Li also showed excitement in his eyes. This is interesting, and Iruka also looked at Xia Li, and finally got down to it completely. The opponent's speed, seal speed, and the method of simplifying the seal made him understand that if he underestimated the opponent and treated the opponent as a student, he might really lose. Chapter 39 Win or Lose. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Xia Li and Iruka looked at each other, as if they both saw that the other was ready, and they moved at the same time. However, the next moment, Iruka's figure disappeared from Xia Li's sight, which surprised him. He didn't recognize that seal. If it wasn't the three-body technique. Bang! Iruka once again knocked a wooden stake to the ground and quickly looked for Xia Li's figure. Even though he had seen it once, he couldn't help but sigh that the proficiency of this substitute technique was really high. He didn't even notice when Xia Li had formed the seal. While being alert, Iruka also reached into the ninja tool bag. Originally, he thought that this step would not be needed, but now it seems that he was too careless. Soon, the subtle sound of the stone breaking through the air made Iruka react, and at the same time he took out the stone that had been prepared long ago and threw it out, colliding with the stones. As for why it was a stone, after all, it was just a battle, and Xia Li was still young. It would not be good if he was injured somewhere, and Xia Li didn't have a shuriken on him. Originally, Iruka thought that it was forbidden to use shuriken in this battle, but soon Xia Li said that he had practiced throwing with stones as shuriken, so he would use stones instead of shuriken, and Iruka thought that stones had limited power, and even if they were hit, it would not be a big deal as long as they were not hit in a fatal place, just a little pain. Unlike shuriken, which was very likely to hit and wound, so it was indeed a good choice. So, Iruka agreed, and at that time he was still sighing that Xia Li had even practiced this, but he was used to being shocked, so he was not surprised. So, the reason why Iruka felt that he was too arrogant was that he thought he could not use much throwing skills, so he did not prepare many stones. Although there were some on the ground in the training ground, even the specially prepared stones were easy to break, not to mention those picked up at random. However, although Xia Li's throwing skills were accurate, they still seemed a little immature, and Iruka finally felt a little relieved. The opponent finally had some things that he was not so good at. The ninjutsu just now, is it the instant body technique? Sure enough, anyone above the Chunin level basically knows this ninjutsu. Xia Li looked at the stone that was shot down at this time, and he was not surprised. He did not think that his throwing technique would have any effect. However, it was not completely useless. Xia Li's eyes flickered. He did not know how many stones were in Iruka's ninja bag, but he was well prepared. He just did not intend to waste them. After all, throwing alone could not defeat the opponent. Xia Li took out the silver kunai from the ninja bag and held it in his hand. In the case of being completely inferior to the opponent in strength, weapons were the best choice at this time. At the same time, Iruka had also taken out the kunai. Although the kunai was sharp, it was relatively easier to control and easier to stop. If he used it, he would not be afraid of accidentally hurting Xia Li. And he did not have many stones, so if Xia Li continued to throw stones, then his best way was to use the kunai to block it, and if he could not block it, he would use ninjutsu to avoid it. However, it seems that Xia Li does not intend to continue throwing stones, which makes Iruka feel relieved. The next moment, the two people, one big and one small, collided with each other. After a few rounds, Xia Li was already at an absolute disadvantage, just as Iruka said before the battle. After all, Iruka is also a Chunin, and Xia Li's current level cannot be colliding in all aspects. Obviously, his skills are not bad, but the difference in strength makes Xia Li extremely passive. This battle seems to end here. But does Xia Li want to do this? Doesn't he know that he is at an absolute disadvantage in basically all aspects? Will he lose faster if he gets close? If he just wants to delay time, then it is indeed the best choice to distance and fight with throwing skills, but Xia Li's goal is not to delay time. He is thinking about how to win this battle. The way to win depends on his hidden cards. If these cards are exposed in advance, Iruka will definitely be on guard, and it will be difficult to win at that time. Therefore, even in such a passive moment, he did not rush to use them. It's over, Xia Li. Although you are a genius, it is true that you have a short time to grow. Iruka said at this time. Although he was in the battle, he was also in a serious state, but he did not show his full strength. The fact that he could still speak can prove this. The next moment, Iruka clenched the kunai in his hand, ready to give Xia Li the last blow, which would determine the outcome of this battle. And this is exactly the moment Xia Li is waiting for. There are arcs jumping on his legs at this time. At this time, Xia Li felt a different feeling on his legs, which is stronger power and faster speed. That's right, after a semester, Xia Li had barely learned how to use lightning release to temporarily enhance his physique, but the extent was not high, and it was far different from the lightning release chakra mode. However, this was the lightning release stimulation method that he had slowly mastered after massaging for so long, and that was most suitable for his body. This method is basically tailor-made by Xia Li for his own body. Even if he tells others the method, it is impossible to use this enhancement method according to Xia Li's method. However, it can be used as a reference, and then he must learn the state of emptiness and slowly observe the method that best suits his body. The reason why Xia Li did not use the lightning release enhancement before was that the difference between his physique and Iruka's was not something that he could catch up with the enhancement he currently mastered, so even if he used it, he was still not as good as Iruka, so using it would be a waste of chakra. Now, Xia Li only strengthened his legs, not for stronger strength, but faster speed. And this sudden increase in speed made Iruka completely unable to react, watching his last attack miss. But Iruka reacted instantly and realized that it was not good, and he seemed to have been hit, as expected. After Xia Li dodged the last attack, he held the silver kunai that he personally gave to the other party and stabbed himself. Iruka had no time to think about why Xia Li's speed suddenly increased so much at that moment. His body shape was already out of coordination because of the last attack before, so it was so difficult to dodge Xia Li's seemingly simple stab at this time. However, a chunin is still a chunin after all. At the last moment, Iruka still dodged the stab in a slightly embarrassing way, and his body exploded and his hands began to form seals. Xia Li immediately chased after him at the moment of the stab. This was the final round he prepared. If he missed it, the opponent would know his burst speed, and then he would basically have no chance of winning. So the victory or defeat was decided at this time. Originally, Xia Li's speed was not much worse than Iruka's. Now with the blessing of the thunder release enhancement, it is naturally faster than Iruka. This also forced Iruka to change the seal that he originally wanted to form to the substitute technique. However, Xia Li obviously would not give Iruka the time to seal. Although his speed was not fast enough to interrupt Iruka's seal, but electric arcs jumped on Xia Li's right hand and arm, and several stones were thrown from Xia Li's hand. These stones were faster and more accurate than any stones Xia Li had thrown before. Xia Li, who had collected Iruka's seal speed before, was sure that even if Iruka's seal could be faster, if he wanted to continue the seal, the stone would hit the seal arm directly, and this could be regarded as Xia Li's victory, not to mention that Iruka still had a kunai in his hand, which would affect the seal speed and become slower. Iruka naturally understood this, looking at the stones, and stopped the seal immediately with some helplessness, and could only hold the kunai tightly again to block the stones. While blocking, Iruka also realized that Xia Li would chase him. Although he lost the initiative, the opponent's speed was mostly enhanced, and his strength was still weaker than his, so he still had a chance. However, this time seemed a bit long. With Xia Li's speed, he should have been close. Iruka, who had knocked down the stone, suddenly reacted and looked at Xia Li over there. Sure enough, he saw that Xia Li had formed the last seal, and then Iruka saw the wind wrapped around Xia Li. Is this wind style, fierce wind palm? Moreover, it feels like something is wrong. Soon, Iruka understood what was wrong, because Xia Li's figure had disappeared in front of him. Without using the instant body technique, Xia Li appeared above his head with another surge in speed, and at this time all he could do was to block himself with both hands. In fact, it is most appropriate to use kunai to block at this time, but Iruka's reason tells him that he cannot use kunai. In fact, he also understands that this ordinary kunai basically cannot hurt the opponent under the wrapping of wind escape, but it is better to be safe than sorry, so Iruka chose to take the kick with his arms. Obviously, at this time, the fierce wind palm is no longer suitable for the name of this ninjutsu. What Xia Li used is, wind escape fierce wind leg. To strengthen is naturally to strengthen to the strongest point, and at this time Xia Li's legs have been strengthened by the power of lightning escape, which is obviously more suitable for the power of fierce wind palm than arms. If lightning escape is to strengthen Xia Li's own power, then fierce wind palm is the external strengthening state. In this state, Xia Li's speed once again ushered in a surge, and all the preparations are for this moment, so that Iruka can't avoid it at all, and can only face Xia Li's fierce wind leg head-on. Bang! Even though Xia Li is only a freshman, after Xia Li's constant training, coupled with the strengthening of lightning release, and finally the instantaneous burst of sea-level ninjutsu gale leg, this power has exceeded a limit. Iruka was knocked out before he could even resist for a short time. At this moment, if it was an enemy, Xia Li would definitely choose to use another wind release, wind cutting technique. But the opponent was Iruka, so Xia Li's final choice was to chase after him with the remaining power of the gale leg. Iruka looked at Xia Li in front of him and the kunai in Xia Li's hand, and he had already understood that he probably really lost this battle. Even if he knew how talented Xia Li was, he never thought that he would lose here. How long has it been? Xia Li can do this. Thinking about what Xia Li used just now, the increase in speed before was definitely thunder release. The electric arc jumping on Xia Li's body can explain everything. Moreover, Iruka later did not expect that Xia Li actually mastered the sea-level ninjutsu gale wind palm. And even very skilled, not limited to the palms, but able to transfer the power of gale palm to the legs, so that the places that have been strengthened can be strengthened again. This is not as simple as 1 + 1, the combined power is completely beyond what Iruka can resist. Teacher Iruka, I won. Xia Li breathed a sigh of relief at this time and said with a smile. Ah, you won. Iruka's mood was a little complicated at this time. He really lost to his own student, and the opponent was still a first-year student. Well, I hit a lot this time and barely managed to win. If I do it again, I definitely won't be able to win. Xia Li looked at Iruka's expression and thought for a while before comforting him. What Xia Li said is also true, because if it happens again, Iruka also knows everything Xia Li knows, then Iruka who is prepared will not fall into the trap as easily as today. In this way, between them, the gap between them is still huge. After all, although Xia Li's chakra has increased, it is still small, so the strengthening of thunder release is not lasting, the gale palm is even shorter, and there is not much practice, so the seal must be formed with a full seal, which Iruka knows it can't be used as a trump card, so it will naturally result in losing. Even this time, it was not easy to win. His chakra was basically used in the last period of time, and it was just enough. At most, he could use the Fukiri technique. This was a chunin, and a teacher-type chunin who was not good at fighting. If he were a fighting ninja, then whether Xia Li could win was another matter. Don't worry. If you win, you win. On the battlefield, when you don't know your opponent well, the teacher is not that fragile. Iruka was a little funny. He just sighed. After thinking about it, he said, "Come with me." Okay. Xia Li also breathed a sigh of relief. It would be bad if Iruka became autistic after being hit by him. He just wanted to test his current combat power, and he didn't want to hit anyone. Soon, Iruka took out a scroll and handed it to Xia Li. This is. Xia Li's eyes lit up, feeling somewhat similar to when he obtained the three-body technique, right? The instant body technique is your reward for defeating me. Iruka also sighed. The previous 3 generations asked him to teach more, but even so, he thought that this scroll would not be handed over until at least the 2nd grade. As a result, it now seems that there is no need to wait until the 2nd grade. Xia Li was immediately surprised when she heard it. It was indeed a teleportation technique. Although it is also a basic ninjutsu, it is very easy to use. Xia Li has wanted to learn this ninjutsu for a long time. The substitute technique is still too passive, and the teleportation technique needs to be more active. The most important thing is that this is also a ninjutsu that he must master in his plan. What the happy Xia Li and the still sighing Iruka didn't know was that the battle between them had been watched by someone with a crystal ball. Chapter 40 Progress and Communications. You are listening at NovelFlow.audio. Chapter 40 Progress and Communication. Today is the last day of the semester for students in the ninja school, so the third generation has already sat in his seat and flipped through the report cards handed up by various teachers on the table. As expected, judging from the grades alone, the best are undoubtedly the second-year Hyuga Niji and the first-year Xia Li. The results of these two are very impressive even when compared with those of the seniors. Hyuga. The third generation looked at Hyuga Niji's name, and couldn't help but think of the other party's father and sighed, not knowing what he was thinking. Then the third generation looked at Xia Li's name again, and was also thinking. He had already read all the information about the other party's father, and even flipped through it more than once. His experience from childhood to adulthood was very innocent and ordinary. Of course, the other party's talent is also okay. From an overall point of view, the other party had already started to work hard to become a jonin when he died, but from the perspective of the third generation, the other party's final destination is probably like a special jonin. Even if he is lucky, he may be able to become an ordinary jonin by virtue of his merits. Unexpectedly, the other party could give birth to such a gifted child, whether in theory, willpower, or his own ninjutsu talent. He is the best. The previous third generation saw such a perfect talent and eventually became the fourth generation Hokage. It was a pity that Kakashi, who obviously also had extremely high talent, wasted a lot because of the White Fang and Obito's affairs, but even so, Kakashi is also an elite ninja in the village and a mainstay of the village. The third generation looked at Xia Li's grades and smiled, waiting for him to grow up. Maybe the village will have another mainstay again. As long as Xia Li can reach the level of combat power of Kakashi without Sharingan, the third generation feels that this investment will not be lost. After reading all the grades and arranging the classes of this year's graduates, the third generation focused his eyes on the crystal ball, and the scene in the ninja school also appeared on it. In the end, the scene really fell on Naruto. However, after Naruto left, the third generation looked at Xia Li next to Naruto and suddenly became interested. The third generation, who often observed Naruto, naturally knew that his deskmate Xia Li was usually the first to leave the classroom. Today, he drove Naruto away first and stayed in the classroom, so he must have something to do. What was it? The third generation kept an eye on Naruto and continued to observe Naruto. After a while, the third generation focused the scene on the ninja school again. Wow, is it a battle with Iruka? The third generation suddenly had some inexplicable expectations when seeing this scene. Soon, he saw the whole process of Xia Li and Iruka's battle from the crystal ball. Even though Xia Li and Iruka's skills were both mediocre in the eyes of the third generation, this must be considered in terms of their age. Iruka's talent can be seen at a glance, but as a teacher, he is undoubtedly very qualified. Xia Li actually won from Iruka, and his talent in ninjutsu is even more exaggerated than the third generation thought before. Not only can he use sea-level ninjutsu, but he can even control it. The substitute technique is simplified to 3 seals, and the speed of forming seals exceeds 3 seals in 1 second. He can fully control sea-level wind escape ninjutsu, and can also use the form change of lightning escape to temporarily strengthen. The most important thing is, Xia Li is only 6 years old. Even Kakashi at this stage only has his own strengths and weaknesses with Xia Li, but Kakashi has the guidance of White Fang after all, and Xia Li just came into contact with ninjutsu at the age of 6. However, Kakashi did not work as hard as Xia Li when he was a child, but hard work cannot deny that this talent is a bit too good. Even this talent is a bit unlike that of an ordinary person, but the third generation has no doubt about Xia Li's identity. If Xia Li is a spy arranged in, then the other village must be crazy. Such a genius is not cultivated well by himself, but thrown into another village as a spy. Even Konoha wouldn't waste money like this. After the third generation took a puff of tobacco, a certain idea in his mind was slowly established. It just so happens that Iruka will come to him again to report Xia Li's talent problem in a while, so it's just right for him to go and call Xia Li. Xia Li walked from the ninja school to the training ground, and while walking, he was thinking about this battle. Overall, he felt it was okay. From the initial test, he got more information than he expected. This was also due to Iruka's carelessness, which made Xia Li know the difference in their physical fitness and the speed of the seal. Iruka's skills were weaker than Xia Li imagined. These were all very important information in the battle. After getting this information, Xia Li had already made a follow-up battle plan. In the end, this plan was successful, and he also won this battle. Sure enough, a battle with intelligence and a battle without intelligence are two completely different things. If he fights Iruka again, he has a chance to win, but the probability, needless to say. However, Xia Li only needs some more time to grow, at least when the power gap is not that big, then it won't be difficult for him to win. Right now, his qualities in all aspects are still too low. In addition, in terms of throwing, Xia Li also knew that his throwing technique only ensured accuracy, and there was no change in throwing. Although this was also related to the stones Xia Li used to throw, it was more that he wanted to learn but didn't know how to practice. According to his understanding, the Uchiha seemed to be the best at changing throwing techniques, and the others were not very good either, and Iruka probably didn't know either, so he could only keep it as it is now. If Xia Li's throwing also had characteristics, it was accuracy and speed. But the lack of change would still be avoided by some ninjas with fast reactions. Of course, Xia Li would not belittle himself. Now he was not completely powerless to resist against the Chunin. He didn't know the opponent's ninjutsu, but did the opponent know his ninjutsu? The opponent was probably not good at throwing, and the most important thing was that if he couldn't beat Xia Li, he could still use the lightning escape enhancement plus the wind escape gale leg to escape. Xia Li's speed was not slow, and with these two increases, Xia Li could still escape from most Chunin who didn't rely on speed. However, he can't be careless because he is only outstanding in one aspect now. His basic attributes are not as good as most genin. He needs to continue to work hard. Thinking of this, Xia Li also came to the training ground. After the battle with Iruka, he still had a lot of physical strength left, so he was not in a hurry to go home. Sinai didn't ask for leave today, so it wouldn't be too late to go back after the training. At the training ground, as expected, Xia Li was already here, and it seemed that Xia Li was working harder than before, as if he was venting. Xia Li could guess why, probably because of the final grades. The assessment for the second year is different from that for the first year. With the ninjutsu course, the importance of ninjutsu to ninjas is self-evident, so ninjutsu accounts for a very high proportion of the grades. In Xia Li's situation, the score for this course can only be 0. In addition, Xia Li's theoretical score is not very good, and it doesn't help to just get the first place in physical skills. His total score is still the last in the class, so, Xia Li's current situation is that he is once again stimulated by his results. Seeing Xia Li's efforts in training, Xia Li was also somewhat motivated and joined in today's training. However, what Xia Li didn't know was that when he was training, Iruka also came to Xia Li's doorstep to find Xia Li, but found that no one was at home, which made Iruka scratch his head. His excitement was also calmed down a little. He was called by the third Hokage to call Xia Li over. Iruka naturally told the third Hokage about Xia Li's victory over him. After all, this was the third Hokage's order. All teachers would report the good seedlings in the class to the third Hokage. I thought it was just a process this time, but I didn't expect the third Hokage to ask him to call Xia Li over. Is this going to be a direct investment? Iruka was also really happy for his students, so he rushed over according to the home address left when registering, and then Xia Li didn't go home at all. At this time, Xia Li wouldn't be training again, right? Iruka took a deep breath. It seemed possible. To be honest, I had always been shocked by Xia Li's talent, but now I suddenly felt, it seemed that it was not unacceptable. Iruka looked at the cold weather and sighed. What could he do? It was a holiday and he had nothing else to do. He would just wait here for a while. Xia Li didn't know that Iruka was waiting for him. After the exercise, he began to use the remaining chakra to give himself a lightning massage. Even though it had been many times, every massage was a kind of enjoyment for the body and mind. He felt that not only the physical aspect, but also the mental aspect would improve a lot. After the massage, Xia Li slowly closed his eyes and slowly entered the state of emptiness. That's right, his progress this semester is more than a little bit. The state of emptiness no longer needs to be in the extreme state after exercise to enter. Although it is not possible to enter directly when it is normal, Xia Li estimates that it will be soon. It was really difficult to enter the state of emptiness and meditation for the first time, but after entering it once, the difficulty was reduced, just like climbing a 90-degree cliff in front, and after climbing to a stage, the rest was just a hillside, although it was still very steep. But the difficulty had been reduced, that is, the state of emptiness and meditation is not as helpful to Xia Li as before, but Xia Li still likes to enter this state, and observe some things in this state, and try to think about some things, because in this state, his thinking is really very clear. It's just a pity that he can't think too much, otherwise he will directly exit the state of emptiness and meditation, but it must not be far away, therefore. The order of the current state of emptiness and thunder escape massage is naturally arranged in the most reasonable way, but it is still far from Xia Li's final idea. After a long time, Xia Li opened his eyes and called Xiao Li over there. "I have to trouble you again today, Xia Li." Xiao Li said a little embarrassedly. "It's okay, a free experimental subject is still very important to me." Xia Li also teased. "Yeah." Xiao Li nodded heavily, not caring about it at all, and his heart was full of gratitude. Xia Li was not kidding. After each state of emptiness, his understanding of the changes in form would deepen. The most suitable experimental subject for these understandings was naturally Xiao Li. After all, Xiao Li's physical talent was still very strong and he could still bear it. After Xia Li finished the experiment, if there was any progress, it would be reflected in his own massage the next day, which could be said to kill two birds with one stone. However, Xia Li did not feel guilty about treating Xiao Li as an experimental subject. After all, although he treated the other party as an experimental subject, if he told other people about this, he would see if they were willing to be his experimental subjects. After all, this experimental subject would not be in danger of life, and it could also improve the strength of the body for free. Why not? Xiao Li also felt comfortable all over and felt like he was going to collapse. With Xia Li's progress, the effect of thunder escape massage on Xiao Li gradually improved. However, it was still completely inferior to Xia Li's own effect, and according to Xia Li's experimental feeling, this should have an upper limit. Xiao Li himself did not have the attribute of thunder. Even if he received thunder escape massage every day, his resistance to thunder attribute would not increase much. Therefore, as Xia Li progresses, he can control chakra more accurately, but the limit that Xiao Li can accept still depends on his resistance to lightning attributes. After all, if the resistance is exceeded, it will cause damage to Xiao Li's body, which is not worth the loss. Soon today's lightning massage ended. Xia Li looked at his hands and couldn't help but smile. He felt that this aspect was up to standard, and his previous idea should be carried out. Then, Xia Li ended today's exercise and said goodbye to Xiao Li. Xiao Li still had to exercise for a long time after receiving the massage, although it is said that in order to maximize the effect of lightning massage, it is best to wait until Xiao Li has finished his exercise, but Xia Li does not have so much time to wait for Xiao Li to finish his exercise, and Xiao Li will not ask Xia Li to wait for him for this, so, even if they all know how to do it for the best effect, neither of them mention this matter. Xia Li has never minded helping Xiao Li, but the premise is not to affect himself. In any case, Xia Li has always been and will always be based on his own interests. Looking at the sky, today is the last day of the semester, so there are no classes. Even if you finish your exercise, it is still early. Sinai probably hasn't gotten off work yet. While thinking, Xia Li finally walked towards his home, and then saw Iruka outside the door. "Teacher Iruka. Why are you here?" Xia Li felt very surprised. Did he come here for revenge because he lost to me? No way. And Iruka shivered from the cold. The weather was not warm. Looking at Xia Li's current state was obviously after exercise. After sighing, Iruka did not hesitate and told Xia Li about the third generation's communication, which made Xia Li's eyes shrink suddenly, followed by a strong surprise. The third generation's communication, what does this mean? He has a clean family background and talent. This kind of communication is basically only good for him, and there will be no harm, let alone worrying about being found out and killed directly. Let's go. The third generation should have been waiting for a long time. Although Iruka was a little cold, he still said immediately. Well, I'd better clean up before I go over there. Xia Li pointed at his sweaty body. Wouldn't it be impolite to go over there like this? Yeah, that's right. Iruka also reacted and agreed, so, after welcoming Iruka into the house and making him a cup of hot tea, Xia Li took his clothes and walked into the bathroom. Even when washing, Xia Li couldn't help but look forward to it. P.S. There is only one chapter recently. I'm very busy at work these days and can't spare time to slack off and write. I'm very tired when I get home, but it's almost the same. 2 chapters are also more than 2,000 words, totaling more than 4,000 words. 1 chapter is actually also 4,000 words, but it's generally less than the total number of words in 2 chapters. It should be fine after the end of the year.